A very good evening. Welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Fundo Mabalane, standing in for Clement Manyatela this evening. Now, on the show tonight, we'll be joined by Tshwane Mayor Cillier Brink. This Thursday, he'll face a no-confidence motion. The DA-led coalition has enjoyed a majority in council, but ActionSA has made it patently clear now that they'll not vote to keep the current mayor in his position. With 18 months at the helm, Herman Mashaba says if Cillier was an ANC mayor, he would be regarded by the same people who defend him now as average by any objective measurement of the current state of the city of Tshwane. Shortly after that interview, we'll speak to ANC's regional spokesperson Bafuze Yabo on their no-confidence motion. The question is, do their numbers tally to remove Brink? And most importantly, who will they be fielding as a candidate for that mayor position? And then a bit later, we speak to Freedom Park CEO Dr. Jane Mufamadi on the relevance of heritage monuments and museums 30 years into our democracy. Now, many historians have said heritage monuments and museums are for more than just preserving the past or our history, but understanding our national identity today. The CEO will expand on this, but first, my comment. So the relationship between the Democratic Alliance and ActionSA in relation to Tshwane has continued to dominate headlines. We've interviewed both sides and they've shared their views, but 2 days ago, a very interesting letter was published by Herman Mashaba, where he was very granular in his highlighting of the failures of the DA-led coalition government after 8 years of many DA mayors. Importantly, in that letter, he accepts the failure as theirs too as part of that government. Now, politics aside, residents of Tshwane have been complaining for years, but all the politicians at the helm dismissed some of their complaints, reduced it to smear campaigns by opposition, or highlighted that they started from a low base, highlighting the levels of corruption, dysfunctionality that they inherited. But mine tonight is not actually a comment, but a question. When is it no longer satisfactory to say we started from a low base? When can government start being held accountable for poor service delivery that people experience on a daily? Well, let's hope Mayor Brink will answer just that. So the question I'm asking tonight is, the DA Cillier Brink has 2 days before he finds out whether he will remain mayor of Tshwane. Do you think he'll survive the motion of no confidence against him? You can send us your WhatsApp voice notes. Our number is 078-459-1897. Remember to tell us your name, surname, and where you're sending that voice note from. And please keep it at 30 seconds or send us an X on @FaceTheNation SABC. The Democratic Alliance Cillier Brink has only 2 days left to find out if he'll continue as the mayor of Tshwane. The Tshwane Metro Council is set to vote on Thursday on a motion of no confidence, which has been tabled against him by the ANC. Brink is facing the nation tonight. Good evening, Mayor. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening. Great to be with you.
No, it's a pleasure as always to have you with us. Now, Mayor, I'm sure you've been able to see the very scathing letter that was written by Herman Mashaba just 2 days ago, where he goes on to say that as ActionSA, they can no longer continue in good conscience to support a government or be part of keeping a government that is quite mediocre according to them. And it didn't seem as though he started with the politics of who betrayed whom, who started speaking to the ANC first. They went on to speak about the insolvent Metro, speaking of a liquidity ratio that stands at 0.6%, rather at 0.6. Mayor, are you comfortable with the current financial position of the Metro?
When I was elected 18 months ago, I made it clear that the financial recovery of Tshwane was absolutely key to achieving all of our other objectives. The city had gone through a number of shocks due to political instability, due to a poor management culture. Those shocks did a great deal of damage. And I made it clear that unless we fix the finances and make significant progress in the short term, we can't hope to improve service delivery infrastructure and the lived experience of Tshwane residents. At that time, ActionSA had been part of Tshwane's government for a year and a half. I resigned my seat in Parliament. I became the coalition candidate. And we set out making deliberate decisions, which we then executed, often in the face of quite significant opposition, to fix the finances. We decided to forgo salary increases for councillors and officials, a critical decision, unleashed a strike. We built a project management office for each aspect of the revenue value chain. We took what the Auditor General had found point for point and started addressing those issues. And the results are significantly improved financial sustainability for the city, not just according to us, but according to Ratings Africa, the best improvement of all the metros on the scale of financial sustainability. We received an improved audit outcome by looking at each of the findings. We have made in the past 2 months $1 billion more. We've collected $1 billion more for the past 2 months compared to last year, exactly because we've put in the efforts to fix things so that we can pay off our Eskom debt and so that we can start making significant progress. Now let's get to ActionSA. If you're a grown-up political party, you're signed up to a coalition agreement, it's your responsibility to make a contribution to the successes. Such a party doesn't take credit for what goes right, as ActionSA has done, and blames its partners for what goes wrong.
No, but in that letter, they actually conceded that they've been part of the failures.
Yeah, well, that's fine. The letter came after 100 other excuses, which also don't have credibility. And the key question is, here's the key question.
Letter, it was them now conceding.
No, forget about the letter. Let's look at what does a party in government do if it's got a serious policy issue. It raises that policy issue internally. It says, Mr. Mayor, unless you change this policy, unless you abandon this, unless you stop doing this, it will put the coalition at risk. ActionSA did none of those things. They did none of those things. They've got significant power sharing. They've got a deputy mayorship. They're in control of portfolios of economic development, social development. They're MMCs of oversight in key northern townships of the city. And at no point did they say that this government should go in a different direction. In fact, I'm on record that I've got an excellent working relationship. When I'm being attacked, it's not by the ActionSA MMCs in my government. By the way, they're still there. They haven't resigned. I'm being attacked by a national leader of ActionSA who pulled the trigger, made the decision, and then after the fact, he comes with big letters and excuses and all sorts of incredible ex post facto explanations.
But can we deny the reality, the lived reality of perhaps those of Soshanguve and Mamelodi, that if you've got your expansion project when it comes to whether it be electricity in those areas, is this something that you can deny?
So let's talk about the progress we've made in the past 18 months. We now have a credible plan in place to get clean water in the taps of people of Hammanskraal, a decades-long problem, which previous administrations couldn't solve. We can't take sole credit for it. We've taken hands with national government in order to achieve it. We're taking action against the service providers and the officials that were involved in irregularities there before. Let's look at the Townlands social housing development, where the beneficiaries, 1,200 households, come from the poorest parts of the city of Tshwane. Rent control, or rent-assisted living, close to places of work, close to places of business opportunities, completed by this government, again, in partnership with national government, but it's a year-long, it is a decades-long project that we finally completed. It shows that we care about social mobility. I can refer to the JJ substation in Soshanguve. You mentioned Soshanguve.
The electricity issues there.
To stabilize that electricity supply after years and years of assaults, cable theft and vandalism, we now have the prospect, if that JJ line is completed, it will stabilize the electricity. Now let's be clear, and I want to take it back to the finances. As I said at the outset, our priority was restore the finances so that we can pay off our debt, settle Eskom debt, so that we can have access to savings and borrowings to build infrastructure. So we must do a great deal more.
But the liquidity ratio now at 0.6 means you cannot meet your short-term liabilities.
Sorry, the liquidity ratio is better. It has in fact improved. So instead of taking responsibility, instead of telling us, listen, coalition partners, this is what you should do differently, Mr. Mashaba is coming up with an after-the-fact explanation for his own deceitful conduct. Let's just be very clear. None of this have got anything to do what ActionSA has done, have got anything to do with the people of Tshwane.
But they laid bare the issues of Tshwane nevertheless.
You can lay bare if you're a political analyst or a commentator. What you do if you're a partner in a coalition government is you make a contribution.
But
you don't blame your partners for the failures.
Because it seems as though, because I've spoken to you before, that you're of the view that the decision taken by ActionSA is for their own political gain. That may be the case, perhaps. We don't know what the real intentions are. That is for them. But nevertheless, can we deny the reality that they've laid bare? That if you have a liquidity issue, if you have an Eskom's debt right now at 6.83 billion, if you have still the issues of the electricity in Soshanguve, the water issues in Mamelodi, and a number of people, the disparities, because there have been allegations that when it comes to service delivery, those perhaps in the townships are not benefiting all that much.
So
there have been refuse issues as well.
I don't want to
rehash. There have been salary issues.
I don't want to rehash what I've just told you about Hammanskraal water, about townlands, about energy projects in Soshanguve. I don't want to rehash those things. I think that has clearly been answered. But what I do need to point to is that on every score, including the current ratio, the city of Tshwane is doing better. Exactly because we're making the tough decisions.
But is better enough?
We're not
if
blaming.
You've got
if I can just finish the answer.
All right.
We're not blaming our coalition partners. We are taking responsibility for improving the position. Are we doing enough? Well, the one thing that Mr. Mashaba's letters and his BS excuses, quite frankly, don't offer is a point of what we could have done differently. Because he doesn't care. This is about national political calculations. He doesn't even have a plan for the future of the city of Tshwane.
It's about national political calculations.
Yes, it's about national.
Can you expand on that?
Well, I think ActionSA did exceptionally poorly in the general election. It's clear that Mr. Mashaba slumbered through that election. He was almost completely absent. And then when he woke up to a terrible result, the only thing he could remember was how angry he was at the DA. He blamed the multi-party charter for his poor performance. He decided not to go into a government of national unity. And now he figures that if the Tshwane coalition succeeds, if we bring clean water to the people of Hammanskraal, if we improve the finances, if we gradually improve the lived experience of the people of Tshwane, as is our project, then the people won't credit ActionSA with those achievements. And so he has to reposition himself. The unfortunate thing is that his only coalition calculation for Tshwane is one in which the EFF will play a role of balance of power.
But what has been your role?
And they will have a toxic influence in the future of Tshwane. So it's easy to bring a motion of no confidence and topple a government. The question is, what is your plan to do things better?
And that is a question we'll pose to the African National Congress because they come just after you. But if you're saying that their considerations
also has to answer to that. They also have to answer.
Fair enough. But if you say that the issues stem from what has happened or transpired nationally, you guys as a region could have isolated the issues. We've seen with the African National Congress, they've been able to isolate issues. The EFF, for instance, is not part of the GNU. But in the region of Johannesburg, they're within the fold insofar as their coalition agreement is concerned. Their MMCs are there. So meaning you could have isolated whatever the picture looks like nationally and negotiated.
You mean between us and ActionSA?
Yes. Because right. I'm saying we've seen what has happened.
To talk about that.
Yes, that you could have isolated the national issues where they've decided to be outside of the GNU and, as they say, be a constructive opposition. Because you guys, there's nobody now to watch the watchmen, as they've stated. So you could have isolated the issues and say, in the metro, we want to stabilize ourselves here, so we're going to negotiate differently and just ignore their position at a national level. So where were the failures there?
So the key question for me is, and commentators often say this, but why can't you solve the dispute between you?
Yes.
The fact is there is no dispute. There was no dispute. In the past 18 months, we had cleared 3 important disputes. The one related to the power stations of the city, the second related to the insourcing of workers, the third related to a set of delegations to the city manager. Me and the Deputy Mayor, Nasipi Moya, who still serves with my delegations in the mayoral committee, sat and we cleared all of those issues. Now, if you reach a point where a coalition partner says, we're done with the coalition with your bad performance, you'd expect them to be able to show, at this point, we raised the following dispute. It wasn't satisfactorily cleared. We weren't happy with the answers. and this is why we leave. The fact is there was no dispute.
But there was an allegation, as we've heard, of that the Democratic Alliance was possibly speaking with the African National Congress.
Where's the proof of that? Mr.
Is this
Mashaba,
the case, or there was no such thing?
So let's talk about this. Mr. Mashaba keeps on saying that. He keeps on saying, we're bringing this functional, stable coalition to a fall because we fear that the DA started talking to the ANC with a view of removing us. And every time he's challenged to give proof of that, he says, I don't have to give proof. Why? Because he's lying. He's coming up with ex post facto rationalizations and explanations for his own dishonest conduct. Now, what I do have proof of is the attempts that I made at every turn to try and keep ActionSA in the coalition. Once Mr. Mashaba started attacking us during the course of August in public, saying that he wants a different coalition, my first port of call was the Deputy Mayor, ActionSA's leader in government. She made it clear to me that the instruction came from national government, that there wasn't a local dispute for us to resolve. I then reached out to Michael Beaumont, the national chairperson of ActionSA. He suggested that we meet, and I followed up, and I tried, and I did everything to have that meeting take place, to understand what we can do to accommodate ActionSA, whatever their grievance is. He stonewalled me. So we tried until the very end. Now, why would a mayor and coalition partners who want to eject ActionSA from government go to those lengths, where we've even written to them from the Coalition Management Committee letters to say, please stop attacking government, come to the negotiating table, use the mechanisms that we have in terms of our coalition agreement to resolve the issues that you might have.
Because as it stands now, you have 108 seats, if we're speaking of the coalition government. 108, they, I believe, have 19 FF plus 17, and so it goes. One would say, I actually listened to one of your interviews that you conducted with another colleague, where you stated that for a coalition government to work, you need, one, a majority, which you guys had, and secondly, ideological coherence.
Yes.
And in this instance, one would say on the face of it, you had that. One would say that there were no significant differences that you would need to reconcile with the ActionSA. I mean, they are a breakaway from the DA in any case. So it seemed as though there were no differences. But here you are today. Someone is still, many are baffled as to how you arrive here. But commentators say, it's not us, but commentators say there's a lack of humility when it comes to the Democratic Alliance. Because for the longest time, you've had Michael Beaumont conducting interviews where we'd state that you come across as the big brother in a coalition, where it's the Democratic Alliance's way and no other.
And it's very interesting that these accusations are made by national leaders of ActionSA. They're not made by the Deputy Mayor, by local leaders. I can imagine there will now be pressure on people like Nasipi Moya to come up with these issues. But the point is, before Mr. Mashaba woke up and started attacking us, we didn't have fundamental issues. You didn't have the kind of personality differences that you saw, for instance, between Trollop and Bobane in Nelson Mandela Bay, where there was this power struggle between mayor and deputy mayor. When I came to be the coalition mayor, not the DA mayor, the coalition mayor in Tshwane, I realized that these things, the accusations of arrogance and so forth, are very often used against the DA.
But coming from a national level.
Sometimes as a negotiating tactic to say, oh no, but you're so arrogant, show us your good faith. And we implemented that coalition agreement to the T. We established the position of deputy mayor under great criticism, including from the ANC, to say, why are you doing this? We don't have money for this. But
even employees within the metro felt
established that because that was part of the agreement. And if you're in a coalition government, the best way to show good faith humility is actually to stick to what you agreed to. I didn't make that agreement, but the moment that I became mayor, it was incumbent on me to implement it, to enable significant power sharing. And you'd also imagine that if the problem was an arrogant mayor or somebody who doesn't want to share power, you'd have the other coalition partners, the FF+, the IFP, the ACDP, those parties lining up behind ActionSA to all tell the same story.
But they could say they're the second biggest. Maybe they felt entitled to more positions than the others.
Well, there's a 2-seat difference between the Freedom Front Plus and ActionSA. And they are just as baffled as we are about the conduct of Mr. Mashaba and ActionSA. So it's very unfortunate. We had a good chance as a coalition. regardless of what happened in government of national unity or anywhere else. We didn't have to consider the options of a government of national unity because together we had a majority. And our coalition partners, and I must emphasize this point, when I say we have done well, when I say we've made progress, it's not me taking credit. It is the credit for a team. It's a team effort. It's a joint effort. It is our joint program of action. And unfortunately, ActionSA has taken one big sledgehammer and just destroyed that.
So in 2 days' time, there's a possibility that you will be removed. You were voted into council at the age of 23, starting off in 2011, and you moved to become MMC, I believe, in 2016. It seemed as though you had a good record. You were just on the rise. And now it could all end in 2 days. How do you feel?
Well, it's not about me. This is a young coalition country. We've just, in terms of our line of history, come out of dominant party democracy. And the metros are an important place where we model coalitions, because I promise you, the likelihood of a party gaining a majority in 2026 at the next local government election is very slim. So we have to take our experiences of governing the metros in Gauteng, of Tshwane, and see how do we do coalitions better. It's not about me. What I am worried about is the independent professionals which this government recruited. People who took us at our word when we said we don't want politicians, we don't want deployed cadres, we want folks who can do the best possible job. And what I'm afraid of is that if you place the EFF at the center of government, as Mr. Mashaba proposes to do, then those people might be at risk. The culture of professionalism that we have built in the past 18 months might be at risk. So I don't know what's going to happen if you look at the numbers, if the ANC goes on with a motion of no confidence, if ActionSA votes for that motion of no confidence, we will be out of government. I will go to opposition and do the best I can possibly do there. I've got no control over that, but I think it is worth an effort to think about what is the solution to Tshwane's problems. Is it going to be to vote a motion of no confidence, more political instability, another churning of politicians? Or is it going to be to say, what progress have we already made and how can we build on that progress going forward?
Mayor Brink, thank you very much for joining us on the program this evening. That was Mayor Brink. He joins us now and we'll see in 2 days what happens. More news after this. Welcome back. Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, ActionSA leader Herman Mashaba has accused the Democratic Alliance of jeopardizing the coalition in Tshwane by seeking a covert alliance with the African National Congress. The Tshwane Metro Council will vote on Thursday on a motion of no confidence, which was tabled against Cillier Brink by the ANC. Bafuze Yabo, ANC's regional spokesperson in Tshwane, is facing the nation tonight. Good evening, Bafuze. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Fundo. Good evening to the viewers.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. I'm sure you heard the mayor's interview. Let's start with just clarity on this point. Did you court the DA first before speaking to ActionSA?
Well, I think there must be clarity provided in the sense that negotiations of party relations to form government have been happening at the level of the province, in the case of Gauteng, and two, at the level of the NEC. And so we have been involved in speaking to all the parties here in Tshwane. But the buck stops with the NEC in this instance. And I would mention this because whilst we are talking to everyone at our level, at the region, there has been those who have been much more responsive to the proposals we've been making.
So meaning there were talks nevertheless? Yes.
Case in point is that the DA would have been stone-faced about keeping the current arrangement, keeping the ANC out of the seat of government. And so even
just for clarity, it means you did approach the Democratic Alliance, but they were unwilling?
Not at the regional level, no.
Okay.
We have been planning to put a motion of no confidence, as you may well know. And in response to that, the DA would have gone public to say they are comfortable with the arrangement that they have. The ANC must stay out of government and it must stay where we are in opposition benches, although we are the leading party in council with 75 seats. And that is a message enough to us that they were rigid in their posture, and we were never going to be able to talk to them on co-governing, if ever there was that possibility, from the level of the region. And therefore, we continued speaking to other smaller parties. We have been doing that, by the way, speaking to smaller parties throughout the 2 terms of government, with the one started in 2016 and the one that started now in 2021.
Just in the interest of time, let's talk about the reasons. I'm sure in a number of platforms you've been able to articulate the reasons why you want Mayor Brink out. Just for the benefit of those who might have not caught those specific interviews, talk us through the reasons why you want him out.
Brink has proven to be a mayor who is very stubborn when the facts are facing him. He is not amenable to the workers of the city. He is not amenable to the residents of the city. He has himself pat himself on the shoulder for not paying the workers an increment for the last, since he came on board as the mayor. And we feel that it's very inhumane to refuse workers.
He's consistently stated that this was informed by their very precarious financial position.
Well, that is arguable, because if you are stating that there is a precarious financial position that the city is under, then you should be seeing improvements in other areas. We are not seeing improvements across the board. And so we ask the question, if you refuse to pay the workers their increment, where are you taking the money? And why is it that you are unable to raise the money from collections of debts that are sitting with residents and other big players in the city? The failures here are failures of leadership and management. And the buck stops with Brink. We cannot speak of anyone else. He's the one at the helm of the city, and this is where we are drawing the line, that he is failing to lead. You cannot lead a cohort of workers who are not motivated by your leadership. You will run into problems because they will not deliver the services you want them to deliver.
I'm sure you've heard the conversation, at least since this motion of no confidence was brought forward, that many are saying, if it's no longer enough to say you inherited a dysfunctional metro, do you as the ANC have a comprehensive plan to ensure that you're then not criticized, or you subject the residents of Tshwane to the same excuses? That if you remove him, or you're successful in removing him in 2 days from now, have you put together a plan or as to who will be at the helm and how exactly you'll address this issue of speaking about legacy and what we've inherited?
All right, just to disambiguate your question, because I think it's a bit compressed. On the question of who will take over, that will be a function of what the leadership of the ANC at the national level will then communicate with us through the various decision-making structures of the ANC. In the ANC, structure talks to structure, and so it's not an individual conversation. It's a conversation between structures. But you must also understand that we are not just alone in this thing. There are other parties who have to be involved if we are to succeed. One, at ousting Mayor Brink. Number two, at establishing a new government.
But wouldn't those conversations have taken place before bringing the motion? Because one would assume you've got a stipulated amount of time to form a government after you have removed a specific mayor. So in that instance, there could have been that assumption by many that the conversations have been happening. You basically have some sort of an idea of the leadership that will come in place. So you're saying that conversation has not taken place, not with your partners and not with your more higher level structures, be it the NEC or even at a provincial level, the PEC?
The conversation is ongoing, Mfundo. The conversation is ongoing, and I'll give a typical example of how the GNU was put together. It took a bit of time before the agreement settled in relation to the establishment of the GNU. The conversation with regards to Tshwane are also ongoing in relation to who then comes in post the removal of Brink. But I can tell you now that the ANC has always had a plan of running the city like we used to run the city before 2016. And
so will you be fielding a candidate for the position of mayor?
Well, I can only say that the decision will be communicated when the decision is made. And I say this because we are subject to the discipline of the organization. I cannot sit here and claim that we have a candidate that we're going to field when National has told us that they are seized with the matter of Tshwane, and they will communicate that decision when the time is right. And I think we still have 7 days once Brink is out to field the candidate. And it's more than enough time to come up with what is it that's going to happen beyond the line.
ActionSA was stating that there's a possibility they could abstain, there's a possibility they could vote with the African National Congress. What is the status now? Will they be voting to remove Brink with you?
Well, I can't speak for another party, unfortunately.
Yes, but at least, at the very least, the last conversation you had, did they give you the assurance that we're not abstaining, we're voting with you?
Well, if what Herman Mashaba has been saying all over the news is anything to go by, they'll be voting with the ANC on the motion of no confidence. And if there are any changes, I suppose, like everyone else will know from the leadership of ActionSA. Other than that, we are proceeding with the motion of no confidence as we have submitted it on time. If there's any other changes that will happen, it will not be on our watch, or it will not be on our discretion.
Any other parties that you've been speaking to?
We've been speaking to a lot of smaller parties. I would say that we've been engaging almost 8 to 9 political parties in that council. Those would be having 1 seat or 2 seats, but we've been literally speaking to almost everyone. It's only that the formulation of the seats in council in Tshwane is quite different, in that you've got literally 4 big players, ourselves, the DA, the EFF, in fact it's 5, ActionSA and the Freedom Front Plus, who hold the bulk of the seats in that council. And everyone else just holds 1 seat, 2 seats, and that's what makes it a bit difficult, in that you cannot form a coalition government without any of the big players. Freedom Front Plus holds 17 seats, ActionSA holds 19 seats, the EFF holds 23 seats. So it's a very precarious balance of numbers to get to that 108 that is desired by everyone to govern the city. Yeah.
I want to take you back to the residents and just how impatient they've grown with the excuses of we've inherited a dysfunctional government, a corrupt government, a bankrupt government. Can you assure the residents that if a coalition led by the African National Congress were to come in, that won't be an excuse? Because it seems that now, if you come in, you'll be coming in on a back foot, because they have become so impatient. They don't want to hear that anymore. It may be a logical explanation, but right now the logical thing for them is for them to finally get services, if some of them were not getting services. Yeah. So would you be able, as the African National Congress, to say no excuses from us? We're not going to talk about anything we've inherited. We're hitting the ground running.
We no longer have the luxury of any excuses, Mfundo, as the African National Congress. I think you would have seen the results of the general elections on the 29th of May. We cannot make anyone a scapegoat for anything. The people want services, and the people want jobs. The people want to be removed from a state of inequality. And we cannot offer any excuses. We must come up with solutions that work and make sure that we deliver services where we govern, when we govern, and we do it excellently so.
All right. Bafuze, thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation. That was Bafuze Yabo, ANC's regional spokesperson, speaking to us. Welcome back. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, Acting President Paul Mashatile aims to honor those who stood against injustices, including oppression, during this year's Heritage Day celebrations. As South Africa marks 3 decades of democracy, reflection on its journey and milestone is key, with heritage monuments and museums serving as custodians of our shared history and essential to understanding our national identity and progress. Dr. Jane Mufamadi joins us today. She's CEO of Freedom Park. Good evening, Doctor. Thank you very much for joining us on Face the Nation.
Good evening, and thank you for having me tonight.
No, it's a pleasure to have you with us. So a bit earlier on today, we listened to the Deputy President saying that we need to continue to forge unity in our diversity. What does Heritage Day mean to you 30 years into our democracy?
Heritage Day is the day that offers us an opportunity as a nation to reflect on who we are, on where we come from, but also to redetermine the future and the direction that we want to take as a nation. We celebrate our diversity. It is an opportunity for us to get to know each other in our beautiful colors. Colors in terms of practices, cultural practices, our multilingualism, and who we are, a beautiful rainbow.
Mm-hmm. Then to our monuments and the spaces that house our history, such as Freedom Park. Just talk us through their importance 30 years on.
It is very important to have monuments like Freedom Park, because within heritage sites like Freedom Park, that is where we remember who we are and where we come from, the journey that we have traversed as a nation. But we also reflect and attempt to understand why we are where we are today as a nation, but draw lessons and inspiration from the past experiences so that we can forge a united nation, so that we can remember the mistakes that we made in the past and correct them to live a better future.
Insofar as then attracting a greater audience, is there perhaps an employing of new technologies to try and reach a greater audience when in these spaces, just to enhance the dialogue?
Yes. Interestingly, most heritage sites, the preference is for people to come personally and interact with the stories that we tell, with the objects and the artifacts. However, we also realize as heritage sites that we need to move with the times in terms of technology. That is why you see us now moving towards what we call virtual tours. So you can sit in your house, you can just log on and you can follow what Freedom Park does, you can watch our exhibits, you can participate, for example, through a lot of linkages now, virtual dialogues and debates that we do. We need to do that, but also within the museum itself. You find that now we have used a lot of technologies. For example, if you come to Freedom Park, you will see that we have created short documentaries.
All right.
Based on our stories, based on what the elders have told us. For example, you can come and watch what we call the story of creation that narrates the beginnings from an African perspective. But there are what we call information panels. You can press a button and you can learn about issues of social cohesion and nation building. You can learn about the liberation heritage. You can learn about the 8 conflicts that shaped what we call South Africa today. So heritage sites are finding themselves having to move with the technology and
Quite
technological
impressive.
developments.
You seem to be doing quite a lot. But just talk us through the importance in forging unity of the different exhibits that many would experience.
It is very important. We want to create sites that, for example, in South Africa, all South Africans, irrespective of their background, it may be political affiliation, it may be religious or cultural affiliations. When they come to places like Freedom Park, they need to find themselves reflected one way or the other. And that is what we showcase at Freedom Park. When you come, you learn about history, heritage, culture, indigenous knowledge systems, and issues of diverse spiritualities. But if you look in particular in the liberation heritage that is the primary focus of Freedom Park, you will also see that the liberation heritage that we exhibit, either through our memorial, but also through exhibits, it's very inclusive. It's about all liberation movements and not one. It's about diverse South Africans. And what is beautiful about our liberation heritage is that various communities fought for it. It was not a one race, one language. Everyone, including our traditional leaders, contributed in the fight against oppression.
Then to the debate that continues to rage on among young people post the Rhodes Must Fall movement that we saw. Young people, some of them, are still of the view that when we look at iconography or memorializing of perhaps the images of colonizers, slave masters, for them they still hold the view that these belong in museums, that if one wants to engage with the very dark past, they need to physically come into museums. They don't believe that these should be in public spaces where they could be triggering and people need to make the choice to engage with what they symbolize. Where do you stand on that debate that continues to this day?
It's a very interesting one, and there is no right or wrong answer, because that argument, it comes from the point of view that says that when I walk through a park and I see, say, for example, a statue of a former oppressor, it opens the wounds. It feels like you are elevating this oppressor or whoever it is who was part of the problem within the context of South Africa. But there is also another view that says that to hide these past atrocities, it's like you're sanitizing history, because 20 years to come, 30 years, people will forget that we once had oppressors. They will also deny that they oppressed us because there is no evidence. However, the argument that these monuments must be in the museums, it's an argument that resonates with us. We need to recontextualize, repurpose, tell the true stories of these people and what they've done. And museums will be that spaces, because we still need to preserve this, not so that we remain angry and we harbor the spirit of anger and division, but so that we use them as lessons, never to repeat them in the future.
And perhaps protect the democracy.
Yes, definitely.
Remembering that it was hard fought for. But what of those that say there might be many that don't come to the museum, so we must allow them to engage with the very hard facts of our history in those business districts, in the public space?
That is why I said there is no right or wrong answer. It depends, as long as they are not privileged over an inclusive history, over an inclusive heritage. And we can also juxtapose them with the postmodern narrative, or in terms of what is our authentic heritage that is inclusive, that tells the authentic stories, and that celebrates the triumph of the human spirit and the victories that we have achieved as a nation.
But as you say, you're more swayed towards that belief by the younger generation now that perhaps there's greater context when you place these at museums. But beyond that, some have said that as well, those who agree with young people say that they have been taught in this era to acknowledge their pain. So perhaps it was still painful even then for perhaps the older generation to interact or engage with these type of monuments in public spaces, but they were at times taught to suppress whatever they felt. But young people are saying, if something triggers me, I will express it and you need to correct it.
Yes, that is why it is very important to have intergenerational dialogues and reach a consensus as a nation. Because hence I'm saying both sides are correct in the manner in which they articulate, but we need to find a middle ground. And preserving these former and colonial monuments within museum spaces should be the best. And if, for example, like I spoke about the virtual tours, and young people will still maybe log on and follow Freedom Park or whatever monument will have been decided that these statues should go to. They can still learn about that. They can still draw inspirations and lessons.
That one is a great initiative, honestly, because a number of them would prefer technology than physically leaving their homes. But then, as for Freedom Park itself, how is the administrative aspects? We've seen it's been in the media as well. There seems to have been some staffers that continue to bring certain issues to the fore around administrative issues. They've even gone to allege some level of nepotism. How is the administrative running of Freedom Park right now? How is everything? Freedom Park is doing very well. And those allegations, if you follow, they've been there for over 5 years now. They are repeated, same stories. They've been investigated and cleared, even by the public protector. And those who keep on alleging, it's because some of them we know it's former staff that we dismissed. These are disgruntled staff. But as I'm sitting here now, Freedom Park is doing very well. Freedom Park continues to grow every day. And we see the numbers increasing also. And our staff continue to grow and achieve greater heights. Doctor, that's quite heartening to hear that Freedom Park is functioning very smoothly. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. That was Dr. Jane Mufamadi, CEO of Freedom Park, speaking to us. Northwest MEC for Economic Development, Conservation, Environment and Tourism, Bitsa Lenkopane, has initiated an investigation into the recent violent incident in Hartbeespoort, where properties were set on fire. Hartbeespoort Dam is a major tourist attraction, ranking third in the province. The area has been experiencing significant post-pandemic recovery. Northwest MEC for Economic Development, Conservation, Environment and Tourism, Bitsa Lenkopane, is facing the nation tonight. Good evening, MEC. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, this issue of racial tension in Hartbeespoort is most certainly concerning for many, but we understand you're investigating the issues. What is your understanding as a start of the main issues, just on the very surface level briefing that you would have received from officials?
Yeah, good evening, Mfundo. Let me agree with you that I will not get to the space of any racial tensions, but I will get to the space of the recent crime reported where one business operation was set alight. But as government, we are closely working on that matter. It is in the hands of the police. Investigations are being carried. So for now, I cannot make any conclusion until the courts pronounces themselves.
Granted, MEC, but when listening to the business owners who have been on several platforms, they seem to characterize what they're experiencing as some sort of racially motivated aggression towards them. But what they have painted when speaking of their experience is a picture of a government that has been caught napping, or even worse, a government which could have officials who are complicit in the whole agenda of obstructing transformation. For instance, they speak as black business owners of individuals who have expired leases. And the big question is, have you conducted an audit to establish who has a valid or expired lease at this point at the very least?
Yeah, no, because you are taking me to an angle of transformation, it is important to highlight to the public the good work that government has done in as far as transformation is concerned on and around Hartbeespoort, especially on issues that seeks to address the inequalities. We have registered serious progress in the past. Before government had to declare this point to undertake transformation, there was an establishment where the CPA called Mekhareng Oberon had lost the land that was belonging to them, of about 500 and something hectares. But government spent 90 million of rents to bring the land back. And as we speak, they are now in possession of their land, and through the land restitution, they are being facilitated. And as government, we are confident that the people of Mekhareng have received their land back, and we have not received any rejections or any negativities around the area. It is not only just around the same dam. We are, as government, busy with the same restitution to get the Kuzo, Nagezi and the Majakaneng's PAs also to get their land. That is part of the transformation. But other than that, you will agree with me that our people once had a matter of being evicted by the issues around the establishments there, but they won the case. And as government, we are working closely to see how to allocate them there.
The restitution of land, pardon me for interjecting there, MEC, just in the interest of time. The restitution of land is commendable, as you state the progress thereof. But the issue around leases, we're hearing from business owners, this is government property. They're leases for 99 years, but they're alleging that some of the leases have expired, but they're business owners who continue to operate. Have you conducted an audit? Do you know at this point as government who has a lease that can continue to operate and which leases have expired?
Let me agree with you that the whole population or establishment around the land or the dam is the estates. We don't have any other establishment except the estates, and we've got leases. the team that the government, because it is not only the MEC, government has established a team led by us as the DDET and the Department of Tourism, because we have interest in attracting and sustaining the relationship that we have with the investors. So I can safely tell you that we have already received 20% of the report coming from the land reform and the Department of Land Affairs. They are going to, as we consolidate and give the whole report outcomes in terms of the data collected, we'll be able to outline that. But we are confident that even if there are wrong things like I have indicated in transformation, we will be able to deal with that, and we will not agree that any element of criminality or wrongdoing should make us to get to a conclusion of now putting a blanket that seeks to make us not to tell the good story and the work that government is doing for our people to transform them from where we were to get to the best after the 1913 land act that did not make our people benefit. For now, we are confident that our people are getting their land back. And the MEC in the budget speech has made it very clear that we are going to collaborate with the Department of Land Affairs so that we even look into the post restitution and see how best we can now make our people get the benefits from the land, which is actually what I witnessed with the number of CPAs that have got their land back.
MEC, it's not just about the land in this instance, it's also just about economic participation. It's, as we've said, quite commendable, the program to ensure that many get back the land. But on this one, it's specifically on economic participation. There is a grouping in that area that is alleging that there is an obstruction of transformation, or they're struggling. When it comes to them participating in the economy there seems to be some sort of strong opposition. So you're saying, at least at this point, you cannot speak with certainty that you know if any other business people are operating with expired leases?
No, what I can tell you is that we are aware that the dam itself, when we deal with it being an economic attraction and what we can say about it being the best tourism point in the province, I can tell you that 35% of those people who come in there, what we need to know is that this point is not only attracting our people from the Northwest, it is also having 35% of the international tourists who, when they come from either Limpopo or Gauteng, they go via Hartbeespoort and
which makes it all the more important that residents of the Northwest must benefit, especially as business people. We fully understand and appreciate how strategic this specific area is, and your residents there in Northwest want to participate equally. There's another allegation from this grouping of business owners that there's no compliance insofar as the regulation to prohibit permanent structures from being built on land that is being leased. Some even allege that a permanent structure in the form of a golf course has been built. Are you aware of this? Was there perhaps an agreement to do so?
Let me agree with you that the terms of reference for the team that I have put together there is going to look into any other allegation, even if we know some of the allegations can be proven not to be right. We would not pronounce until we work closely as government with other departments, including the human rights, to can reach a conclusion. But I can safely say, on my table, there is one incident, except that people will come and say, this is what they were told and this is how they were treated. But the police is working around the clock, and government departments that are including the municipality looking into their planning and the whole section of the planning on the side of the land reform, the land affairs department and the municipality will come together, and we are going to hand that report publicly, and action will be taken against whoever is on the wrong side of the law.
All right, MEC, pardon me, just in the interest of time, we've unfortunately run out of time. When can we expect that report?
The report is to come out by the 5th of this coming month.
Right.
The committee is working around the clock. We are confident that they are doing well. the head of department this morning gave a brief that they had the first phase of the briefing. And we're excited that our people are going to get clarity on whatever collection that is needed.
All right, MEC, thank you very much for your time. That's Northwest MEC for Economic Development, Conservation, Environment and Tourism, Bitsa Lenkopane, speaking to us. And that's where I leave it for this evening. Clement is back on Thursday. Good night.